I'm very pleased to be here with my very noisy panel over here. This panel is about tools and technologies that are going to be used to create impactful VR, AR, and mixed reality experiences. And today I hope to address some important development issues regarding today's tools and where we see the needs and constraints and opportunities for future tools in creating useful and interesting, impactful VR and AR experiences. I'd like to start with Diana, and we'll work our way across as they each introduce themselves and their backgrounds, and then we'll get started with some questions.
Hey guys, I'm Diana. I'm from Unity. I work for VR Labs. I'm there heading external research. What that means is I forge strong collaborations with industrial and academic labs to tackle some of the hard problems that we see in labs. Our mission is to really focus on problems 1 to 5 years out. So we're in a very lucky position in that respect. Awesome.
Hi, I'm Diana. How rare to have two Dianas in an AR conference right now in a forum. I'm the CTO and co-founder for Escher Reality. We build a mobile augmented reality SDK that makes it easy for game developers to do AR. And I have a lot of experience in computer vision, data science, and AI in previous job launching television products.
So my name is Kaye Mason, and I am the API lead for Google VR Daydream. I'm also the spec editor for OpenXR, and I also work on rendering for Daydream. Before that, I was a grad student at University of, I worked in the games industry for 10 years at Electronic Arts. I shipped Sims 4 and Lord of the Rings, and before that, I was a grad student in Calgary. We were just talking because my fellow panelist is also from Alberta, and I studied computer graphics and artificial intelligence.
My name is Kruszewski. I guess at this point I'm a serial tech entrepreneur. I've been programming since I was 12, making video games. My first company, my PhD is not in AI, but my first company was an AI pathfinding company. Second company was a high-level brain editor system, behavior tree system, and the latest company, wrnch. We're using computer vision to track humans, human pose estimation. So we track humans with 2D cameras in real time.
Thank you, everyone. The first topic that I'd like to start with by asking a question is for Paul. And I want to start by discussing the biggest hurdles that you all see right now for content development in AR and VR.
I think that the biggest hurdle is the speed of everything is changing in this space. Like just keeping up with each individual area. So I'm working on human pose estimation, and the rate of development is going so fast, and deep learning is accelerating everything. So all the pieces are going really fast and changing, and then gluing the pieces together, it becomes a constant thing. So it's like this constant integration. So I think at a high level, it's just everything's coming together, but each person's pushing their individual piece, and trying to keep that all integrated is really hard as far as I can tell.
Right, and Diana Ford, you're in Unity VR Labs, so what do you see evolving there? What kind of experiences has your team had?
Sure. So yeah, we do have VR authoring tools, and also in terms of the AR, we're right now tackling a number of problems in networking for ARs, like how do we get devices to talk to each other? That seems to be a big problem. I'm sure a lot of you have encountered. But also, if we I think on a more generalized level, I think we're in a very interesting position these days where there's, with sensors, it's like the sensors are evolving, the hardware is evolving, and I think just testing these benchmarks and getting the accuracy and precision for the sensors, and getting what is, from a content standpoint, where are these, how do we calibrate, how to get the calibrations right, where like what's going to give us the highest quality, and that seems to be a gap that in the literature as well as in the applied that we haven't worked out yet. And as Paul mentioned, technology is just changing, and everything's just shifting so fast, and so we're not even able to. By the time you want to run an experiment, it's already the new sensors out, and so. in terms of if we're going to kind of focus more on piecing complex content, you run into organization and ontologies, right? Like, how do we organize this content, and how can we create scalable content? How can we, another unanswered question is how do we develop, if you want to create this content in the space, like with Editor VR, you know, we want to give you the opportunity to visualize the space and move things around and develop your own tools so you can create, but we're not going to sit there, we're not at the stage that we're going to sit there and develop in AR and VR.
So are you seeing big changes in how the content pipeline is evolving? The two of you, I know, any of you? And Diana,
yeah.
I know you're working on an SDK and...
Correct. I think, as everyone has mentioned here, the technology is moving so fast that doesn't give time to developers to really internalize or grok how it works to really create good experiences. You really need to get intimate with your tools to then get to the next level and create something that really engages end users. And right now, everyone is figuring out what is the right interface. How do you not create a lot of pain to your developers? There's a lot of impatience. You want your, for example, things like your iteration cycle to make it faster. Like VR is really annoying to, okay, you create experience, then you need to put it in the device and then test it out, and that whole cycle takes 10 minutes to just do one line of code to see it, 10 minutes, as opposed to regular development in web where you just compile and see it in the web, in your web browser.
Yeah, I think that you're totally right in the sense of all the problems of game development just got more compounded, right? So game development, if you've done game development, it was always about the iteration time because, you know, especially as programmers, we want to work on that one feature. And I see this, I've seen this in the past, I've seen it before, where it's like, they make the feature awesome. And I was like, did you test it in the game? Oh, it worked, made the unit tests. So that has always been a problem in games, and it's gotten a lot better. But now with VR and even worse in AR, you're really interacting with the real world, and it's so hard to set up proper tests and testing. So you have somebody, they develop a feature, and then getting it all the way to the user experience. For me, anyways, for us, it's hard. It's
yeah, that's
really,
something
really
that
hard.
we've been really trying to work on and make that iteration cycle fast, so that developers start actually thinking of what they need to do, like discovering the new game dynamics, because games in AR are not going to be what they're going to be in mobile. So that's what we are building.
Right.
So one of my favorite aspects of being a game programmer was working with artists, and I loved watching artists work and seeing the way they did things. And one thing that I saw in the games industry, all of the artists' art content was developed in tools like Maya or Softimage back in the day, or whatever, and Blender these days maybe. And it was all developed in systems where you have 2D ambiguity. So if you've ever played a game like Monument Valley, you can see the 2D ambiguity. And artists are dealing with that all the time. They have to model their content, rotate it, model it, rotate it to try and get a view of things. And when we first saw artists working with Tilt Brush, which we make at Google, it was just an amazing experience because you're watching them make their content on the 2D screen, and the 2D ambiguity is there for you as a viewer, but it's totally dissolved for them. They don't have that 2D ambiguity anymore. They can just model in 3D directly. And it's a really powerful tool. And watching the artists and how excited they get about this makes me really excited. And I think you're right in that it's moving really fast. So we have tools like Tilt Brush for artists to work in, but we don't have a pipeline yet to get that. And that's not there yet. So I think when these things catch up, there's going to be a revolution in how art is created, because the artists aren't going to have to be fighting with 2D ambiguity anymore. That's going to be gone. And I think that's really powerful. But getting the tools in place to support that is not, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure it will.
Well, Diana, at your work at Unity, they're aware of the big change, the impact on the content pipeline, and you're working with the community as well, I assume, with plugins, et cetera, to kind of smooth that along, or can you talk about that?
Absolutely. The process, at least from a lab's perspective, I'm in heavy dialogues with Hollywood at the moment, with content production companies like Weta and studios like Fox, Digital Domain. And what I'm finding is that they also don't know what the pipelines, what the answer is for the pipelines. And I think the point of intersection is what we recognize is that we cannot solve the problem without the content. We need new tools. We don't have the engine needs new pipelines, and we're doing this every day, right? We do have, like, we've started tackling the entertainment film production pipelines in our engines, and we have timeline, but we're still not quite there. Probably I shouldn't be saying that. It's like, we are there. But yes, what I'm realizing is that just again, creating complex content is difficult. It's a difficult task. The traditional pipelines, real time. Anytime you throw in the word real time, that's where the problems come in, right? And so for that, everything needs to change. And then when you're changing and when you're exploring, you have to answer, why are we moving to real time, right? And where and you know, do we need to solve all the problems for real time? So, like, which problems do we keep offline? So this is kind of you know, yeah, we want to use AR and VR as distribution. At least the content companies, they want to use a distribution platform. So, like, which parts can we keep offline? Which parts do we solve the problem and we push for the solution, for the tool to serve for real-time purposes?
That's very interesting. Switching topics a tiny bit, Kaye, in your work at Kronos, working as the spec editor for OpenXR, where are things at with APIs and standards right now for VR and AR, in your opinion?
So I'm really impressed with the amount of collaboration. For those of you who don't know, OpenXR is our collaboration, or Kronos' collaboration effort, which it involves us and Oculus, and it involves Valve, and all of these big names in platforms, as well as Unity and Unreal there. And you can take a look at the Kronos website and see all the other participants. There are some people who are making input devices. There are hardware manufacturers who are involved, and just the kind of the goodwill and the technical expertise that is there, it really amazes me. And we're all working together because for developers and for the industry and for engines as well, it's really important that we have a way to develop for VR that isn't every platform having its own way of doing things, because it's really difficult as a developer if right now if you use Valve's engine, for example, and you're developing a frame loop, you have to block in a different place with Valve, Oculus, and with Daydream. And that makes it really hard to develop a frame loop, because you fundamentally have to write your app in 3 very different ways for all 3 platforms. And we know that's true, and we're trying to fix it. And I feel good about the fact that we're going to come up with a way to solve these problems. So that's good, and it's good that we're all working together, and the goodwill. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for Oculus and a lot of respect for Valve, and I feel like they have a lot of respect for us too. So it's going really well.
Do you feel like the group is making good progress already?
I do feel like we're making really good progress. And we still have a lot of work to do, but again, we have a lot of expertise, and a lot of people are really excited about it. So
A lot of
very
smart
hopeful.
people there. And Diana, in your work on an AR SDK, correct? Have you looked at standards at all, or are you interested in contributing to standards in the AR space?
I mean, standards make it easier for developers, so they learn it once and it works everywhere. That's great. I think where AR is as opposed to VR is a bit still too early. People don't know how to really develop for it. There's certain ways that people are thinking markers, no markers, and where is it going? It will make sense later on. But right now, we're still figuring out what makes sense for developers, what is the right experience, so get them to build. If we can get to the place where you can build a really good AR experience in, let's say, 30 minutes, then that's a success. And then from coding it to an app.
That would be amazing.
So that's what we're shooting for.
Right. And Paul, you have a lot of experience in this area, in graphics and AI and computer vision. Are you using any standards or interested in forging standards in your work?
That's an excellent question. So with our particular technology, because it's a computer vision system where the API itself is the simplest I've ever had the privilege of working on. That's a relief, because it's like 2D video in, 3D humans out. So 3D human is pretty standard, thanks to the animation, people, the game people. So we're sort of counting on, because this could go into all kinds of different applications outside of AR and VR, we sort of look at the game engines as sort of our standards, if you will, in the sense of if we can play nicely with the main game engines and the main VR systems, that's sort of how we're tackling it. Because I think there's a lot of stuff that has to settle. So I'll let the bigger companies settle those things.
Right, and I
Yeah.
think for the first time we're seeing a convergence, if you will, of Hollywood 360 video, what was
Yeah.
formerly linear entertainment, and now, of course, pretty much all of us are from nonlinear entertainment from the game industry. So I may bring this back to Diana, but are the people you're working with in Hollywood, the 360 video types, are they also obviously want to use a game engine if they're working with Unity, but how do you see these two different development types and styles, interactive game developers versus those that just work in, say, 360 stitching of video together? How do you see these groups of engineers and technologists and artists coming together?
The convergence.
Yeah, the convergence.
yeah.
Is it happening, or is it just
Yeah,
still
it's definitely
pipe dream?
happening. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that there is a lot of overlap in the pipelines. I think where they diverge is the interaction, where they interact, and those points we haven't figured out. Nobody's figured out yet. So,
Paul?
But I just was at I think it was GTC.
Right.
Epic had a I think it was the mill or the foundry. And they did a commercial where they shot a car. If you haven't seen this, you really should see it, because I think that's sort of all about this. Could have been done with Unity too. It just happened to be with Unreal in the sense of, so they built a car, a real car, and it had all these markers on it. It looked like a go-kart effectively. And then what they did is so you could drive the car around in the real world, and you were capturing it with cameras. And there was a lot of cool computer vision that was going on. And then they threw it into the game engine, and then they rendered out the car, the car du jour, like they were doing. I can't remember which company it was. It was Pontiac or something. But they would do, we're going to render out this car, and it looked perfect. Have you guys seen this? Yeah. So so this idea of virtual sets. So that was ultimately, it was consumed as a TV commercial, but fundamentally a game engine enabled it. But weirdly, so AR and visual effects, right, are sort of the same thing for me, anyways. What's visual effects? You do a seamless blend of the real world and the synthetic world. Augmented reality is sort of the same, except it's interactive. And so I thought this was a really interesting example.
One is
of
frames per second and one is hours per frame.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. But you know what? But to that. But
Good
people are
point.
doing. But and if you're going to stop me when I get totally off topic. But this notion of pre-visual. We went from pre-visualization in films using game engines, and now people are doing virtual sets.
I was just
and
going to ask
everything.
that. It was all about previs like 7 years ago, like FMX and
and ultimately
like
that's
that,
when it becomes consumer grade, then it's AR, right? That's how I sort of see this continuum of super visual effects that take hours and millions of people to my daughter on Snapchat making barf come out of her mouth. There's a whole continuum, right?
Oh, I thought it was just my daughter who did
Yeah,
that.
no, I think all daughters, all
kids.
teenage girls from 13 to 16.
Or the
do
rabbit ears, yeah.
Yes.
And Diana, do you see something similar with your work in
For
building
sure.
an SDK?
What we're taking, Snapchat is a bit more primitive AR, we would call it. Is a good 4, 5, 10-second experience. But what happens when you need to start powering, let's call it a visual effect experience that's more than a couple minutes, 10 minutes, a real game that becomes engaging, where you need to start incorporating the world. And some of the internal games that we've built, for example, we start using real objects in the world that get incorporated and quote-unquote reality distorted. We can start applying textures, mining the color of the world, or understanding certain planes and doing funky things and do essentially special effects to some extent. And doing that for long-term AR experiences, that's where we need to push the industry to go.
Right.
Before the 5, 10-second Snapchatty things, what does a game for 10 minutes look? Something that's engaging and fun.
Wow, interesting. That's kind of a good segue into my last question, kind of my blue sky question here. What do you think developers should be looking out to support 12 to 18 months from now, as far as either off-the-shelf tools or be prepared to keep developing their own solutions? I'm going to start here and work our way down with Diana. Go ahead.
Sure. I think the focus, and just so I'm not kind of spitting out features, just kind of abstract it a little bit. I think the two areas that I see we're constantly going back to is tools and features around high fidelity content and accurately representing content. And this seems to be, it's like people want to accurately simulate things for AR and VR. They also want to have the highest fidelity for a specific platform.
Do you think there's any tools that are relatively new on the market that do a good job of that?
Ours.
You do?
By ours.
Oh, I
Sorry.
guess giving you guys all a chance to pitch here, and I didn't realize that. We'll get to you, Paul.
I'm an entrepreneur. What do you want?
So Unity is working really hard then, I assume, to reach that.
We definitely,
cross that
yeah,
chasm,
we
so to
definitely, yeah. I mean, right now, in conjunction, I think you said that you can safely achieve that for a lot of the things. Like we've opened up our rendering pipeline, for example, as just one very specific example. So now we have a scriptable render loop that you can download from GitHub, and that would allow you to have full control over your rendering and what it looks like. And so you no longer have to do forward rendering and deferred rendering.
So the rendering loop has been separated out from the engine and open sourced, so to speak?
No, it hasn't been separated out from the engine. It's just you can download it, and you can just so you can have the complete control over the coding. Right.
Yeah.
So it used to be the way it used to be for us as a checkbox. You just go and you go like,
Right,
I
yes.
would like to use deferred.
Yes,
right.
yes, I remember that.
Yes. And so at this point you'd have complete control. You no longer have to do a checkpoint. You just have this one big blank screen that you could just write out whatever needs to happen for your specific needs. And so in that respect, you could achieve high fidelity. And now it goes back, it's in the hands of the developers to figure out what they want, how they want to represent it. So
I guess, is that supported through their new Vulkan support?
I'm not sure, actually.
Me neither.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not
TBD
sure.
on
yeah,
that one.
TBD, yeah.
Diana?
For us, I think one of the main things that we already talked about was enabling developer flow really quick, that they can iterate really quickly, because VR, AR has been very slow because of devices. One other thing that VR suffered was accessibility to devices and the user install base. So for us, we are enabling AR on mobile devices through AR. The other aspect for us is next, a bit more meta, is enabling them to really discover new game dynamics and loops, because games, for us in our industry, is going to be definitely different than what mobile games are. Mobile games were very different than desktop. Even social games were very different. And AR games are going to be for sure different than VR. And people still don't know exactly where it needs to go, but there are compelling use cases, because we've seen in our private beta and some of the games we built that people are getting creative, and some things that you couldn't do before, you could do them today in AR. For example, I want to make a hole here and see something from the 18th century coming out and popping up, and having essentially some cool experience that it changes your reality.
So you think the way that developers use your tool and how they create content's going to drive some of the future solutions for support of that content?
A lot more mind share and getting
Right.
more of the creative minds, and getting a bit of, right now tools are getting in the way of people. It's just,
Yes.
people get stuck and a bit paralyzed. Oh, this is so hard, I need to learn what is all these things that are going on, and understanding and what mixed reality even is, and educating people.
Right. And Kaye, we haven't mentioned Daydream, but you work on Daydream at Google, correct?
Yeah. So I work on Daydream for our announcements at I/O. Well, first of all, let me say that I would, if you're really looking to see what's happening, watch for announcements that are being made by the platforms companies. Watch for announcements from Unity. Watch for announcements from Epic, because a lot of developers I know make their applications with Unity, and they make their applications with Unreal. So a lot of your tools developments are going to come through there. In terms of our announcements that we came out with at I/O this year, we're going to be releasing. We're going to be having Daydream headsets with positional tracking soon. So that's going to be a big game changer. So how is that going to work? How are those going to integrate with systems that have no positional tracking? How are you going to develop an app that works on both of those? Or are you going to develop, what's going to happen there? So watch for that. Watch what Unity and Unreal do. With that, if you use Unity and Unreal. In terms of OpenXR, too, watch for devices that can support, even mobile devices that can support two different platforms. What do you do with your development when you're on one of those phones? What do you want your application to do? What should the behavior be? So those are going to be things that you have to solve, and watch for tools that are solving them.
Cool. And about wrnch, Paul, do you integrate it all with any of these bigger game engines?
Yes, yeah, and they're actually really, it's gotten so much easier. I've done these integrations for years and years, and like the app, come to the booth. The apps we've built are running at them, we do with Unity, super easy, got our team up and running, because we had a bunch of computer vision people, some game people, but not all game people. We got up and running fast, deployed it on the iPhone really fast, so that was lots of fun. So absolutely, we want to have that working, because people don't want to. I actually don't want people to learn anything about our system. I just want them to learn about your system, learn about Unreal 4, and sort of like you're saying, it just magically works. Like, oh, there's a human in there all of a sudden, and we're tracking.
So are you, all right, this might be a dumb question, but are you like a plug-in for Unity or Unreal?
We're a
Will you
complementary
be?
engine, so we hook up sockets and things.
Oh,
We
okay.
view ourselves as an engine too, but and I think that goes back to the, sort of the complexity of this space, right? Is that because we're one of the keynotes, I think it was yesterday, from PCT, he had a really great slide. If you guys went on this sort of yin and yang of the physical and the digital world. And I think game engines have been really brilliant about the digital world, but I think Slam and other things are all about how do you bring the real world into the game engine, and so that's why I don't view it as a plugin. I view it as the yin and the yang, if you will.
Interesting. I think that kind of wraps up our panel, but if anyone from the audience has a question, I'd be happy to bring over the mic.
I don't need mine. Is Lumberyard / CryEngine participating in this OpenXR? Like, how do they fit into this whole ecosystem? You hear nothing about them. I don't think anyone from there is here. What's the panel's take on what's going on at Lumberyard? Amazon?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Umbrella.
Rolling Stone. I mean, I'm not from there. Just asking.
That's a good question.
So I don't know what I can state about who's participating in OpenXR, but I can tell you to go look at the OpenXR website and look and see what companies are participating, because they're all listed there. So as far as Lumberyard, I'm actually quite familiar with it because someone I worked with at Electronic Arts is leading mobile development for Lumberyard right now. And I think it's really awesome and really cool. And as far as I know, at present, they don't have Daydream support, but I'm really hopeful they'll have it in the future. I've pestered him several times. So, and, I don't know what they're working on directly because I don't have insight. I mean, he doesn't tell me anything that's not public. So, but I think Lumberyard is really cool. I think it's great, and it's got a great future. So I'm excited to see what they do.
Well, I know you mentioned high fidelity, so that's the top of the food chain, right, in terms of fidelity of rendering, even though everybody else is catching up.
I've actually used Lumberyard. I used to teach at UCLA, and so I was engine agnostic. I've taught Unreal, Unity, and Lumberyard. I haven't used it for a good while, so I feel like anything I say, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of their new developments. At the time, we were NDA'd, and we were in the very early stages, and I know that they were making huge leaps, to augment the CryEngine, so we were at that stage. But yeah, some very cool stuff has come out from the, in terms of rendering, cool demos from the Crytek community. So,
Anybody else have a question? Let me bring you the mic. I think it would be better if everyone hears. There you go.
Sure, I've got a question about controls. I will just say I know a bunch of the folks over at Lumberyard. To your question, CryEngine is very PC console focused, and it's going to be a while before it comfortably supports the mobile standalone range. I think that's something that they aspire to. But realistically, from where they are, they have some time to go, and we need to be patient with them. Sorry, the question that I have is actually about controls, controllers and hand tracking, because earlier you guys were talking about productivity in VR and AR, and I actually wanted to ask you if you think that productivity is more going to be enabled by hand tracking or by controllers or a bit of both, because it seems like there's a lot of growth in that space and a lot of need to figure out and to gradually standardize.
I think this is top of my head, right? Just a very futuristic answer, but I think haptic feedback will play a role. I've seen some pretty interesting stuff come out from robotics, organic robotics labs, where they're kind of dealing with skins and turning them to actuators. So you're turning can turn any object practically into a controller. That's kind of like your sci-fi vision of what it would mean. And I've also seen some NASA seems to have a really good handle on this what's the word, the switching between real world and virtual world, and kind of really giving you access to real life objects in virtual reality or in augmented reality, and that I've seen some pretty cool demos come out of that. So I think that's where we're heading, and that's what would push it to productive levels.
Okay, well, I think that's it. I won't keep everyone from their lunch, but thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, Rita.